What it will mean to your children and grandchildren, Part 2. We couldn't think of a better title and stuff, and we wanted to go ahead and continue on that type of thing, because there's a lot of things have happened since then. We've been able to do some things, and anyhow, we want to kind of share that with you. Now, kind of the overall picture today is going to be that we'll have each one of the panelists share about 10 minutes on a particular topic, and I'll introduce them and let them do their pre-assigned thing. And then we're going to open it up for questions and answers from you. And the sky's the limit. You can ask anything you would like. We don't guarantee any answers, but we sure enjoy the questions. But we'll try to accommodate you and to refer back to whatever we can on the subject. Yesterday morning, H.B. London spoke on Good Samaritan, and he talked about something that I thought was so apropos to what we're dealing about today. Remember, he talked about the hospital and the fences, and how that when, everybody builds a hospital, everybody gets excited, and there's a ribbon cutting, and people come out, and all kinds of great stuff. And then there's those who, build a fence to keep the kids from falling off this cliff that happens to be down where the hospital is, down in the valley down below. But the people that build the fence don't get any recognition. In fact, nobody knows they do it. And in fact, usually people don't like a fence because it's rules, so maybe they'll go cut it so they can still get through. It's almost a comparison between this type of thing we're going to be talking about. What we're going to be talking about is that fence. People who think they're going to try to build a fence to keep people from falling into trouble. Now, there are times, reality tells us that we do need hospitals, and I don't want to put down hospitals. I've been in them. I was glad they were there. Very thankful. And reality tells us that people are going to crawl over the fence. Reality tells us that somebody's going to throw somebody else over the fence. They're going to be enticed over the fence, or the wire's going to get cut, they're going to get hurt, and we're going to need the hospitals. But today, if you can kind of get that picture view in your mind, what we're talking about is building that fence. Now, one thing about things, and I'm going to warn you ahead of time, some things that we're going to be getting around to, it's easy to get donors to get excited about building a hospital. In fact, wife and I just got back from China, traveling with a group of funders, and there were some hospitals, and there was some medical work going on, and that was exciting. I mean, that was really great. But it's not too exciting to get involved in building fences. And you're going to see a direct correlation as we get into it and share a few facts with you about this. You'll see the difference between the fences and the hospital. We're going to take a while, and we're going to shock you. We're going to tell you some very negative things. Or we're limiting it to 10 minutes. Okay? So if you can survive through that, you'll be in good shape. But there's some things that you need to know. I'm thinking of a portion of Scripture in John 8:42 when Jesus says, "And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." We've debated about sometimes always telling people about the real negative, shocking things that are happening. You got to go back to Scripture. And Jesus said, "You'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free." We're going to tell you about some very positive things. We're going to tell you about a strategy that we've come to, we spent some time with and trying to come up with, and particularly for this gathering and for people who are possible funders or maybe don't know how to get engaged at whatever level in this particular subject. So we've come up with a strategy. We're going to be talking about that. And then we're going to be talking about that YouTube can become a fence builder, and give you some things. And then we're going to open it up. That shouldn't take over 30 minutes, guys. Is that right? Is that what we said? They've had me before for a moderator. Know I carry a big stick. When it's time up, I just pull the plug on them. I shut off their mic, Anyhow, first of all, we're going to have share on the topic is Jim Johnson with Beyond Rejection Ministry. Jim and I have been friends. In fact, we've been friends with my wife, myself, for a number of years. We've gotten to know him, and Jim is kind of our man on the street. He's going to tell us what's happening. What are the activists doing these days? So, Jim, you got your mic on. You can either stand up or whatever you want to do. You can't speak from here and have your mic on both. We'll have problems. He wants you to speak from there.
Okay, I understand that. Want to stand up?
They want to see you, Jim.
Okay. For your sake and for theirs, so that you can stop me on time, I'm going to read. And I did not write this, but it basically is 99% from my heart. It was written for me because we found that there are people that have that gift. And I don't personally have that gift, although I can call myself a journalist. Is anything... No.
Yeah, there he goes. Good.
I'll be flipping it on and off.
You're a man.
Anything that I say that may sound insensitive to anyone on either side of any issue or in between on the issue. Remember that, please, with me, that what I do say is based on the lives that I have dealt with in my own life, empirical and first-hand evidence. I mean, lots of evidence, not just something that I've conjured up in my own mind. And the deaths of nearly 700 people to AIDS in the last 15 years. And the Lord was kind enough to utilize me in the pioneering development of hospice and home health care in the United States from the very earliest of years. And so that my statements are based on that compassion for those persons that I had lived with, many of who and most of who are dead now, including my very closest friends and my own godfather. Where we stand. To date, our side has failed. Our side, the pro-family conservative traditional side, has failed in an attempt to hold at bay the advancement of organized homosexuality. They have proceeded relatively unabated in precisely the arenas where we have made it a point to engage them. We have not failed because we are any less intelligent, any less sophisticated, or any less committed to our opponents. We have failed because we lack a clear vision and effective leadership. In fairly assessing where we stand now, we cannot ignore the fundamental and obvious reality that our side only has ground to give and theirs only has ground to gain. Americans did at one point accept nearly unanimously the premise, quite literally, interpreted in our laws and culture, that homosexuality is wrong, unhealthy, should be illegal, and frankly is un-American because of its inherent selfish character and obviously self-destructive tendencies. Certainly, some erosion of that sentiment might naturally occur over time, so it would be unfair to suggest that any little bit of ground gained by organized homosexuality due to the erosion is a reflection of our side's collective failure. Even so, this natural give and take of public sentiment neither honestly explains nor justifiably excuses the fact that organized homosexuality has made deep inroads into our general culture. So if not this factor alone, then what has led to the collective failure to effectively counter the gains of organized homosexuality? The political approach, a proven failure. Simply stated, our collective failure is due to our collective political approach, an approach dominated by bureaucracy, personalities, and I underline that personally, money, and power. But most of all, an approach which totally ignores the fundamental nature of the problem. Gay politics, or in other words, organized homosexuality, is a group manifestation of the homosexual's pathological need to justify his existence. It's nothing more. The need, they feel guilty about what they do, and all the time, and that is why they are into everything and seemingly everywhere right now, because wherever they turn in our traditional culture, they are reminded of their pain of conscience. And they have mistakenly led themselves and us to think that these pains of conscience would disappear overnight if only all remnants of homophobia were done away with. So they're fighting everything, and so are we. And herein lies the problem. Our side's response to these outward manifestations of guilt has been to treat them symptomatically. Our whole approach has been to reduce to reacting to the symptoms. By doing so, we have successfully diverted our attention and resources away from more effectual solutions. This redirection away from an effectual approach has led to many vain struggles on our part, and to a very confounding irony. The more we focus on political approach, the more we lose ground in the war for the hearts and minds of people, which in turn leads to ever-increasing political defeats. Defeats even in the form of victories, like defending traditional marriage. We never dreamed we would ever be facing a situation. That was a loss. Having to defend marriage. The failed political approach is characterized by the special institutional behaviors. Each are an example of external responses. First, the political approach is money-driven and hence money-motivated. If a potential solution cannot raise money through grassroots or direct mail campaigns, it's not implemented. Raising money then replaces sound solutions as a primary justification for the work. Second, the political approach is personality-based. The cult of personality grips the political approach because of our reliance on money. We addictively grip the political approach and embrace famous people, media hounds, as cultural ambulance chasers who themselves, or who others, allow their names to be used to raise money through the exploitation of base public desires for gossip, alarm, and the misfortune of others. Of course, aside from this fact that personalities give our opponents someone to demonize, the problem with this reliance on personality is that most of these individuals fall from grace sooner or later, and when they fall, so does our cause. Third, the political approach is a correction-centered approach. While there is nothing inherently flawed with the aspect of the political approach, after all, self-correction or repentance is the basis for Christ-like progression, our sole reliance on it in public forums perverts its importance. We are ultimately led to rely on numerical strength for our success. In other words, as it applies to homosexuality particularly, we pit the public's perception of the number of our correction-centered success stories against our number of failures. Because of the inherent few repentant souls out there, the public perceives our woeful showing of the evidence as narrow minds, ignorance, and hate. Emphasis on correction over prevention also precludes a focus on innocent and misguided children and only invites further attention to the daily whims of consulting adults. Fourth, our political approach increasingly relies on government solutions. Ironically, our side has looked more and more to government for solutions to what has been traditionally considered the arena of families and churches. While acknowledging that our opponents are the ones who have obsessively confused private morality with public policy, the obsession provides little justification for our side to join in the confusion. The thinking which destroys a culture is not the same thinking which restores it. Mirroring the tactics of our opponents only hastens our social and governmental demise. And lastly, the political approach leads to innumerable thoughtless, strategic, and tactical mistakes. For example, we try to manage our side of the culture war for Washington, D.C., when the real battle, all in all, held in local and state venues. This strategic mistake, once again, ironically mirrors those who we say we oppose. Those who also try to orchestrate their plans from one centralized bureaucratic location. An example of the tactical mistake in our pretend for line drawing, it would be line drawing in the sand. We are forever tempting our opponents to cross that line. Every time we do so only creates a standard for our cultural enemies to shoot for and succeed in crossing.
Jim, would you like to just show them, take 1 minute, just show them some of the stuff over here? Your mic will work right over here.
Okay.
Just take a minute.
Show and tell is a little bit burdensome this year. It's much more than last year, and this was the priority thing. Pretty much everything on these tables and in these bags over here is youth-centered. I met a number of pastors, children over the years, primarily men that have gone into a homosexual lifestyle. And there's several books that have come out, and this is the most recent. It came from a Baptist family, this particular one. Most of this is Safe Schools material. And the Safe Schools projects are increasing. And just to give you an idea of how much literature is coming out, this is gender material in this catalog. These are all the new books, and this is actually 2 months old. And this is all the books that have come out recently. on gay and lesbian issues. I just couldn't bring all the books this year. It wasn't possible. Everything is focused towards children. And the videos here, I brought a half a dozen or so of the videos. There's now 18 primary videos focused at getting into schools, into public schools, and some private schools. The Safe Schools projects can be anything from a local project or the national projects. One of the programs that we set through this year was the first gay, lesbian teachers, straight teachers alliance in Salt Lake City that was strategically used because of the Mormon Belt, which is Idaho, Utah, and Arizona. We only have 18 states left with sodomy laws in the United States, and 3 of them are the Mormon Belt, and the remainder are the Bible Belt. And most of the Bible Belt is over. And those losses, incidentally, have nothing to do with homosexuality. Those losses had to do with heterosexuals wanting the sodomy laws removed. Although a lot of people blame the gay community for that. It's Elementary is one of the most famous of the videos. Also over here, if you want to look at it during show and tell time, is the Versace book. If you really want to know what the man saw, how he saw the world, this book visually explains the way he looked at the world. And that story I'm not at liberty to discuss. That's an ongoing investigation. More Safe Schools things. These are all strategically laid out to indoctrinate from all levels, from NEA level all the way down to local schools, in gay and lesbian teaching, and to develop groups of gay-straight alliances within those school districts. Was that enough, Don?
That's good.
Okay.
Great. Here in this big pile is, 1 minute please. Here in this big pile is the one thing that has been produced this year, and we had to get involved in producing ourselves. It's a training material for Jim Burns' National Institute of Youth Ministries to go along with what they've done, type of thing. We have it both in English and in Spanish. It's not completed yet. I mean, we just stole it from the printer this week, and it was faxed to us in a hurry just to get it here so we could at least have something to show you. And we've had to work on this. Our team had to work on this personally to get this material done. We're working on a second book that would be standalone in the area that we'll be addressing is prevention of things. Can we save our stories? Or you got a question? Well, team, Jim, my wife Diana, myself, and our ghostwriter, we took the ghost off of her. She's written for a number of people, one being Chuck Colson. And one of the later books that she wrote with a book that you may have read about China, Their Blood Cries Out, it's Leila Gilbert. So the 4 of us worked together and doing it, and Leila's very apt on writing. Very, very good on writing. Yes?
The second one, so are the materials you just spoke about, are they Christian materials, or are they the materials that are being distributed?
Those are all secular. The only Christian materials are what Don has. I'm sorry.
This is it. And some of the things when we've done this and give our pilot shoot and just to see what the reaction was, everybody says, well, give us some more materials, and stuff like that. And I said, you're looking at it. We're developing it. And so hopefully a lot will follow after. But just to let you know that the Christian community has not done anything to address the issue.
Those are all secular.
Yeah. A man on the street has gathered them off the street and yes. Go. The question is, have they tracked any of the schools and stuff where they're in? And
yes. Without going into QA.
Yeah, we're going to bring that up in about 20 minutes. Appreciate great. We'll need to get into that. Our next fellow is Herb Schlossberg, and I've known Herb for a number of years because he's also worked the same foundation, same people that my wife and I work for. Herb has been a person who's has been writing on the Victorian era, and we decided to give him a challenging break and have him come in for 6 months and give us an inside, kind of outsider look, and there's some questions that we wanted to have fresh set of eyes look at to see whether we were missing some things in looking at this. So Herb was our fresh set of eyes to look at it, and when he got it was a 6 months deal which ends tomorrow, and he goes back to another job. But anyway, Herb about halfway through was and called me up, Don. He says, Don, he said, what you've asked me to do, he says, everything that's been written on this stuff from the other side, it's all been written. I said, well, I knew that. He said, well, what did you give me this assignment for? I said, well, we had to prove whether I was seeing things right or not. He says, well, I don't like that. But anyhow, Herb says, I think I got a better idea, something very positive that needs to be done, something I picked up. I said, well, let's go with that. So, Herb, I got one more thing. With that, Herb suggests we need to come up with this group, we call it the stealth group, and it was consisted of a real cross-section of people, and we wanted to run some things by them, interact with them, and just come up with a strategy. And not to tell you who these people are, but I'm just going to give you the profile of the 12 people. One was a program officer. We had a person there from the Catholic Alliance Action, a person from Family Research, one from the National Center for Fathering, a research writer. We had some more program officers and property managers, a person that has been involved with the Ministry of Hospices to AIDS. We had our writer there. We had an architect and who also has been involved in the Christian ministry. And we had a person who's a special ed teacher, Christian ministry, and an AIDS giver. And then we had a person who's a congressional aide, not AID, but AIDE, in Washington, D.C., who's we've known for a while. But anyhow, we brought in this cross-section of people for one day down here in Colorado Springs. And as the guys can contest with them, I drove them hard. We're going to try to come up with something, and we had Herb prepare some things on a strategy, which I'm going to ask for him to share with us at this particular time, Herb.
Okay, Don, I'm going to take your microphone because they want people standing up.
Turn yours off.
It's off.
Okay.
Good. Take that, please.
I don't know if everybody really caught it. I think most of you did. This material that Jim was talking about is all material produced by homosexuals for use in the public schools. I know some of you got it, some of you may not have, but that ought to be clear. We've talked about the fence that we're going to build in order to keep people from tumbling off the cliff and ending up broken at the bottom of the cliff. And my assignment is to tell you something about what that fence will look like. I can't tell you exactly what it will look like because that will be a decision made by this group that Don has just told you about, a group of really first-class people that I am really quite proud to be associated with. And they're going to be looking at the various strategies that we ought to be using to do something about this problem. There are 7 sections to this fence that we have identified, and I just want to tell you very briefly what these 7 sections are. The first section is a section which is intended to reverse the infiltration of the schools. We want to make sure that people understand that their children are being taught by teachers and counselors in the schools that homosexual behavior is normal, thus exposing them to grave moral and medical risks. We want to deal with legislation and court cases which restrict the rights of homosexual activists to speak to children in classrooms and in assemblies. We want to make sure that there are alternative points of view expressed in the schools so that it isn't just the homosexual position. We want to make sure that legal help is available to school boards who want to stop the infiltration of homosexual teaching but have been threatened with court cases, sometimes with their own net worth at risk. We want to be able to provide help to them. We want to see that laws already on the books that provide for informed consent of parents and gender counseling really are enforced. They're there in some cases, but they're not being enforced. The second section of the fence will deal with training. We want to train concerned citizens to testify in legislative meetings. Legislatures have meetings, committee meetings, they want testimony, and it's often only the other side that has people to testify. We want to provide short courses for clergy and others to counsel people with gender disturbances. We want to train speakers and writers to get their point of view across effectively. We want to train public officials, helping them deal with homosexual activists in a way that's responsible and also legal. The third section of the fence deals with strategies for the churches. Many pastors of conservative churches know that there's something wrong with the homosexual advance, but they don't know how to deal with it. And they really would like some help in knowing what to do. There are also struggling anti-homosexual organizations, often made up of former homosexuals in mainline denominations, facing a great deal of hostility from officials in those denominations. And it ought to be possible for us to figure out ways to help them in those churches. The fourth section of the fence deals with cultural strategies. We would like to have legal remedies to enforce existing obscenity laws. Up until 1992, there really was a substantial enforcement of obscenity laws that have been on the books for a long time. Since 1992, the enforcement of those laws has gone by the boards in many cases, and I just saw in the newspaper last week that Cincinnati has now opened up the city to hardcore pornography, and that was one place where the anti-pornographic revolution began about 10 or 15 years ago. Now the tide has come back, but those laws are still on the books, and it ought to be possible to enforce them. We want to raise public awareness about pornography in public libraries. The American Library Association has established guidelines followed by a great many librarians in public libraries, which admit material which has long been thought of as pornographic. And in fact, these librarians often will not allow the opposing point of view because it's supposed to be homophobic or opposed to the civil rights, or sometimes they say hate literature. The fifth section of the fence we want to erect deals with family issues. Often parents, with the best intentions of the world, leave their children in the care of people which exposes the children to pedophiles. And many children have just been wrecked in this way. In fact, many adult homosexuals will tell you that they entered that style of life because they were abused as children. We want to publicize this so that parents understand the dangers. We want to defend parents' rights to teach their values and protect their children from the influence of opposing values. One of the people who's working with us has a very interesting way of putting this. This is a woman in New England. She puts it this way: every parent has the right to know that homosexuality is both preventable and treatable. So it elevates the status of the parents as the one who's responsible for teaching the children, rather than the schools or government officials or librarians or others. The sixth section of the fence we want to erect deals with research strategies. We are in the process of building a complete database on homosexuality that will be available to researchers and practitioners all around the world. And when this is finished, we expect to put it up on the World Wide Web so it'll be available to anybody. We want to commission research projects that will be useful to help people come to a knowledge of the truth about homosexuality. Much of the research that's being conducted in this area is conducted by homosexual activists, and a lot of it has been exploded as unrepeatable and of no scientific validity, but it still gets put out. We would like to commission research that's done more responsibly. We would like to be able to fund investigative reporting by sympathetic magazines which will bring to light the truth about what the homosexual agenda is and what the activists are doing. And finally, the seventh portion of the fence deals with public relations strategies. We would like to be able to prepare advertising that speaks to the particular issues that come up when they come up in a timely way. And this could be in covering a number of various subjects. It will be family-related, educational, statutory, medical, and any other aspect of the problem. We want to be able to highlight the failures of the homosexual scientist to provide convincing research. What happens is somebody comes up with a study showing that homosexual brain physiology is different from that of heterosexuals. That gets plastered all over the newspapers, and now everybody knows that it's really a matter of genetics. It's not a matter of volition. It has nothing to do with morality. A year or two later, that research has exploded. It can't be replicated, and it's buried on page 16C of the newspaper. Nobody ever finds out about it. We would like to be able to publicize this sort of thing. A lot of people run legal risks in telling the truth about the homosexual agenda and financial risks, and therefore they tend not to say anything about it. We would like to provide legal protection from them to encourage them to say what they know. We'd like to publicize the fact that all of this material here that Jim has collected is in fact being used in the schools. People are shocked when they see that. Well, there ought to be millions of people who are shocked, but they're not going to be if they're not told. And so what we want to do is make sure that they do know about that. And finally, when homosexuals do come out of that lifestyle, they do so with fear of isolation, in some cases fear of retribution. They need support. We want to make sure they have support. And as more of them do come out, that will help us in the public relations area. Now, this is not exhaustive. We expect that this stealth group that Don has told you about will take a very close look at various projects. It may be that some of the things that I have said will not be selected. We're going to use some of the same criteria that many of you use in deciding what to fund. First of all, is it doable? Is it cost effective? Is it being proposed to be done by the right kind of people, or should there be other people who are doing it? Is there a less expensive way of doing it? And finally, what criteria should be used in judging the outcome?
Thank you, Herb. One thing I haven't put down there in my notes, I think you can pick it up by now. We're not clones up here. We're all different. In fact, even as we get into the funding thing, some of us we have different priorities, different interests, and different things, and that has not been a negative for us. It's been a positive. We've been able to learn to work together and build off of each other's strengths, and also hopefully shore up each other's weaknesses. So you're not going to see the same type of thing. You know, Jim is different from myself, from Herb, and as you'll get to know Daryl here in just a minute. But we are different people, and we do have different emphasis in going about it. I wanted to just read you one thing came in the mail the other day, and just to give you an idea and kind of set the stage for Daryl, because he's going to talk about funding, the funding possibilities, and a number of things that we are doing. But this was written to me from a church that has been involved in this subject, both helping people who are dying of AIDS and people who are struggling with a lifestyle. They have all the right criteria, very gentle, very good. And our group has been involved in funding them, and he wrote this note to me. I just got it just a week ago. Last year we inquired of grant information from 300 foundations and organizations. Of the 300, 11 stated that they would consider us. Later, of the 11, all said that because of the sensitivity nature of our ministry, we were beyond their scope of funding. This type of thing we've encountered time and time and time again. When we talk about a fence and nobody wants to come and join and see a fence building, it's for real. So this is one of the reasons for having this meeting again. And Daryl, I'm going to turn it over to you to share however you want to do it.
I wanted to share with y'all just a testimony of someone that has been looking at this issue not as extensively as the three gentlemen here. I came into it about 8 months ago. I just took a job at the Maclellan Foundation. The first assignment they gave me was this. I wasn't quite sure if that was a test of whether I should stay around or not, but I said, if I get assignments like this, maybe I'll leave myself. But it's a difficult issue, very difficult issue. I was fearful of the issue, and I would guess that a number of y'all out there are fearful of it also. And as I began to look at the issue, I did become even more fearful. It is amazing how organized and strategic the other side is. But at the same time, as I had opportunities to go to different meetings and meet a lot of people from the political spectrum all the way to the counseling ministries, people who have come out of the lifestyle, and in my own prayer life, asked God to give me a heart for this issue too, and a love for the people. I think as we heard some of our Bible teaching, H.B. London, talking about, it's very difficult to try and approach this from a Christian level. How would Christ approach this issue? And it's not one of hate against hate. I don't believe that's our response. And so what I was looking for, and what I'd really been mandated to look for on the foundation side, is what is the proactive side of this issue? What can we do to help? Not what can we do to fight, not what we can do to push back. There are, within a comprehensive strategy, there's always those where you'd have those two components of kind of a proactive or reactive side of it. And there are certainly some stopgap measures that needed to happen. As I looked into it very quickly, I realized there was this tremendous disconnect between the evangelical funding community and the ministries out there. A lot of them had no idea what who foundations were or individuals. They virtually were existing on total grassroots funding at a very low level. I'd venture to guess that not too many of y'all would be able to name a multiple, 2 or 3 ministries, evangelical ministries in this issue. I certainly couldn't. And that would just, confirm the fact that there's this disconnect. The church has been really silent and has just not wanted to address this issue. As I've talked with some of the people that struggling with AIDS and the lifestyle, they said that they really believe that if the church would have responded as Jesus calls us to respond to these things back in the 80s, early 80s, when the AIDS crisis really came on the scene in a big way, that we probably wouldn't be in the predicament we are now, where we feel totally overwhelmed with the other side. I mean, just to give you some very raw numbers of what the other side has funding in the hundreds of millions, and that's probably even conservative on that. You can look at the Forbes 400, even their billionaire section, and see men who openly are in the lifestyle and support the lifestyle at a huge level that would overwhelm funding from the evangelical side. So it's not an issue of let's get our money against their money, but we know that we have God on our side and nothing is impossible for Him. So really the issue is, and I'm excited to see y'all here in the room, is what's your response to all of this? And what I try to do is I dealt with really some hurt from a lot of these ministers saying, where is the evangelical side here? Where's the funding side? We see, we know about all this money. You look at some of the ministries that have been talking up on the platform, and you see major money going into all those. And they're saying, how do we talk to these people? Where does that happen? And I just tried to put myself, in y'all's perspective. As someone that that's not looked at it, not wanted to look at it, it takes a lot of time. There are probably a lot of other issues that you'd rather deal with and get to know better than this one. And so what I'd like to offer to y'all is a solution to that. I felt like there would be several barriers to entry to even getting involved on a funding level in this. And one of those, as I've asked other funders, is just the sensitivity area. There's probably a lot of foundations that would not want to have grants made to openly known ministries in this arena to be on their 990s. A lot of individuals that wouldn't want to write a check on there because the opposition's strategy is to really go after very strongly the people who are opposing them, and they do that in a pretty nasty way. And I think what conjures up in the vision of is ACT UP ending up at the door of your foundation or your house or something like that would be everyone's worst nightmare. But we do have some funding vehicles that we can tell you about for those who would be interested in making some grants, direct grants, and having control of those monies, but to do that anonymously. And I think that's definitely something that a lot of people would have as a felt need. The other side is to, I think, look at the issue on, again, what can we do what are we for instead of what are we against? And as I've looked at this issue, the two major things that we can be for is for our youth and for healthy fathering. Those are two of the main issues that if we can, on the preventative side, engage that, the likelihood of young men and women entering the lifestyle drops dramatically. And to take a look and just be overwhelmed with what the other side has here, the battleground is the schools. The opposition totally, their success depends on recruitment. And they're doing that in the schools. It's not in all the other places. You can see it in a very comprehensive strategy, but where they're putting their money, and the greatest emphasis is the schools. And we have no response to that. Do you realize what Don held up, which is still in the prototype that's just being finished right now, that there was not a Sunday school curriculum for any Sunday schools in the U.S. There was no training on this in any of the national youth ministries on this issue. Nothing written. That's the level we're starting at here. It's just almost ground zero. And all the things that Herb outlined, you'd think, well, surely we have some of those things in place. It's like Nehemiah building the wall. Basically, we're saying, come help us build the wall. There is virtually no wall up there right now. But not to be overly negative. The exciting thing is we have identified potential projects. There's already been some significant funding from, again, not having a great base to start from, but I think some significant funding already done in this on this issue alone this year in '97. We have some handouts just to give you an idea on some of the projects that have been funded, some projects that still need some funding, and a list of just some other ministries. And this is not very comprehensive. We can get we're again just trying to put a lot of these things together right now. We'd ask that you treat this material with sensitivity too, though. I think we all would appreciate that. But we have some very exciting people, committed people, gifted people, in all aspects of the strategy that Herb outlined that are anointed to deal with this issue. And we're seeing some great success. And so I don't want to leave y'all with a negative opinion on what's going on out there, but I would just ask that there definitely be some prayerful consideration as to the response of what's going on out here. This is one of the issues that as I've gone around and talked with a lot of the cultural thinkers and leaders, I would all be familiar with, and say, what are the top 3 or 4 major issues facing America today? Every one of them has this on their short list. It's that big of an issue. So we would prayerfully appreciate and seek y'all's involvement in this at whatever level the Lord would lead you. We have, I know that Herb outlined a strategy, and he went through that pretty quickly. We have, we're going to be working on this, a drafting process, but we would be happy to, what we're going to do is we're going to ask Terry and Diana to pass back a participants listing. If you want to just check your name to get a little bit more information on this, that way we can send you the strategy information, and then also we have limited copies of some of the project funding too. Thanks.
Yeah, did you hear that? If your name is not on there, we just took this off of the conference. We gave up one of our good sheets. But you can go ahead and mark it, and if you change your mind later on, we will take it off. We won't hold it to you in blood and all that stuff. We'd like to do it this time. We'd like to open it up for questions to any one of the panelists. Again, yes, I'll take the lady in the middle.
I'm manager of a video production house. We have been talking about making videos for Christian parents on this issue to inform them about it, and are looking for resources at this point on how to go about this. So I would love to be able to talk with you further.
Please do. And what she said that you're manager of a video publishing, Christian video publishing house. I just want to get this on the tape. That's why I'm repeating it. We want to make a video of this. Great. Yes, we want to talk to you. Very much so. This lady over here. Yes. Is there any tracking of the information going to public schools and? And her as a mother, how can she find out if any of this has gone into those hands?
Every parent should.
You on, Jim? You on?
Every parent should and should challenge their parents and their people at their churches, married and unmarried, or whatever condition, to, as soon as possible, know and investigate all levels of education in their community. It's got to be settled on a community basis. It's that wide now to where it's almost impossible for us to monitor it until the data bank's up. However, we do know some strategic areas that have been picked. We do know, for instance, it's in 200 schools in Massachusetts. I can answer something like that for you. I can give you that heavyweight figure to show you how severe this problem is.
Daryl,
let me say one of the
The strategy has been changed on that. The goal is to get it away from sex ed and get it into other curriculum. Anything. Athletics, science, math, anything. Sciences. History.
There's a there is no national system-wide tracking of all that. Our response to this, because we realize where the battleground is it with the youth and in the schools. Our response to that is to do a national conference that would equip on a grassroots level parents, grandparents, school teachers, local council people to the issue. And right now we're putting together a project with Focus on the Family Research Council that will produce a national seminar for this, and then hopefully some spin-offs, a lot of different materials, videos, books, and training on this issue for parents and others.
Because so often people in different schools, I don't know how blatant the titles are, but it's camouflage.
Right. Well, that's how extensive it is. He just showed you catalogs of all those. It's huge.
It's so huge.
I mean,
this is
thousands.
approximately a tenth.
Yeah.
Of this year. This is just this year. This is a tenth of this year.
Are there catalogs you could order?
There are catalogs that could be ordered from the opposition, and because we have nothing, it's so extensive, I would challenge those of you that are interested to go up to Show and Tell and write down, leaf through these things and take note of what you think is important for you. I tried to be sensitive to you and keep as much pornography away from there as possible for the sake of the women.
Yeah, last year we had a lot of it. It was very shocking, and problem was what to do with the material after we left. Bob?
A quick question on the correlation between pornography and homosexuality. Is there you mentioned it, but I didn't see you say it.
Okay, is there a connection between homosexuality and pornography?
Yeah, he will answer that.
Big deal. I know Rebecca Dawson was involved in that on the pornography side.
Okay.
How do those two mix in that?
All pornography is homosexual. All pornography. Because it's homoerotic. Number one. And number two, the connection, that just think about that and take it home with you for those of you that want to remember it. All pornography is homosexual from its very root. But the connection of organized distribution of pornography is extremely involved in the homosexual issue. And it's one reason that they're able to fund so substantially your opposition on this particular subject, because they are not about to give up those financial resources because they're in the billions of dollars.
Herb, did you have a comment?
Oh no. Let me just say one thing on this. Jim was my initial guide in this whole thing, and he took me down to the Lambda Rising bookstore at DuPont Circle in Washington. And he said we were going to get a whole bunch of stuff there so I could get properly introduced to this subject. And I did show up literally with a suitcase on wheels, and Jim filled it up for me. And a lot of this stuff really is quite revolting. But after we left, he said to me, "Did you see what was going on in the back room?" And I said, "No." He said, "That's where the hardcore stuff is." And there were a lot of men in there just going through that stuff. This big conference that was held at Georgetown University was held just this past summer by people like us out of Marquette University. And I saw a letter that one of the old-line homosexual leaders had written to the leader of this conference, who's a professor at the university. And he really emphasized the fact, he was defending homosexuality, but he was defending the fact that it was heavily laden with pornographic material. He thought that was a point in its favor because it was an exact counterpart, his argument went, to what heterosexual men use to further their interests.
Yeah.
So I would say very, very close connection.
There's an interesting comment that he made, just quoting from this letter. The fellow said that, when you talk about change, he says it's like you're proselytizing on us. He says, and we only had the word prevention. It was only mentioned in there. We did not come off the way we had hoped it would. But he says prevention to us is like genocide. And when he made that comment, I knew that we'd hit the button. That was very sensitive. We were on the mark. Any other questions? Yes, Rachel?
Do you ever, somebody from this group, represent Deadwood community, like on a smaller scale? Like if, say my husband and I response to you come to where we live, and you come and inform our community about this issue.
Yeah, I could not do it because I'm a program officer for a foundation. I know Daryl's a program officer for a foundation. The only one we have, and Herb's got another assignment, so at least Jim.
Do you do that kind of thing?
I did for years, and one of the great defeats from 10 years ago of my work with small communities was the recent loss in Oak Park, Illinois. I remember one week when I drove every night from Rockford, Illinois to Chicago with Rebecca, almost all those nights, working and teaching the community there on everything that we've discussed here and more. And one of the great losses of '97 personally for me was to watch Oak Park go down the drain on this issue. Is the desire still there to go educate people? Yes, there are those of us and those within the ex-gay ministries and those within the coalitions that would come. Personally answering you and everyone in this room, yes, we would do everything we could to get someone to you. I would do everything. But is it possible? I don't know. I don't know what's possible anymore. I was gone at 168 days last year, and
Yeah, we had Jim on the road an awful lot.
You don't feel like it's effective?
Oh, I think it's effective. It's maybe not as effective as I wanted to see it be, but I mean, it may be effective after I'm dead, you know. I realize now I won't live to see it. I mean, I'm 50 years old. I'm not going to live to see a radical change unless there's a radical change in the hearts of people within the Christian community.
Can I say something about that? The problem is the ranks are thin. That's why the burden is so heavy on the backs of people like Jim. But I think, in a way, we've been too negative. I think that's the feeling. I think we've all done a good job, but the general impression you're getting is really more negative than it ought to be. Can I just talk about this for a minute or two, Don? Somebody asked Jim Dobson a question this morning about how things seem to be going in the culture. And first he said things look pretty bleak. And then some other things seemed to come to his mind, and he said some quite positive things. And the bottom line in all this is that nobody knows. I was trained to be a student of history, and that's one of the things that I take from the study of history, is that people are in the midst of a situation, and they're unable to tell how things are going. Later on, they can look back and say, oh yes, now I see that was a turning point, or now things really were not quite so bad as we thought then, or maybe things were worse than we realized at the time. But at the time you go through it, it's hard to tell just what's happening. We saw that great dramatic presentation of William Wilberforce. Yeah. There were lots of things he couldn't tell you about William Wilberforce in just a few minutes like that. But for the last 4 or 5 years, I spent most of my time studying the whole era in which Wilberforce lived. And I can tell you that when his work started, at the time of his conversion back in the 1780s, England was about as low as it could be on a cultural and spiritual level. I could go back to the 1660s and tell you why that's going to be so, but Don would throw something at me if I tried to do that. But the bottom was probably reached in the 1730s, when people were saying, I have quotes from Anglican bishops who were saying, never in the history of the world has the Christian church been held in so much contempt as right now in the 1730s in England. I have a quote from Montesquieu from the year 1730, the French writer, who said, when anybody mentions religion in England, they laugh at it. That seemed to be the bottom, and yet in 1738 John Wesley was converted. 1739 the Methodist movement began, and then gradually evangelical congregations arose in the Church of England, and some of the people that were very influential on Wilberforce came out of those congregations. And when Wilberforce talked about the reformation of manners as well as the eradication of slavery, that was actually happening in the 1780s, 90s, 1810s, 20s, 30s, and they didn't know it. Many of them didn't know it. Wilberforce was making entirely negative remarks in the 1810s when the transformation had progressed enormously. And so if we focus on how terrible things are, and they're doing this in the schools, and the politicians are doing that, and the churches are sleeping, and all of this negative stuff, we will completely miss the idea, which is a biblical idea, and which has happened time and time again historically, that the gospel changes not only individuals, but also societies. And I believe that that is happening now. I see little signs of it. I'm not going to preach to you about this. I'm like everybody else. I can't see very well what's happening in my own period either. But I do think that there are signs of great changes taking place. One of those signs being extreme nervousness and fear on the parts of those who are part of this cultural revolution, bringing about the whole change of sexual and moral antinomianism. They are starting to get worried now. Even in our denomination, they're starting to get worried. I won't tell you which denomination. So do not let us discourage you, please. We see great hope And God is in the business of changing even our society. We just have to get on board.
One of the things, I would just make a comment here of a personal nature. We have to face this question quite a bit within our own ranks. You know, when you take a good, honest look at it, you see it and you say, "Oh my gosh!" But yet, the Lord has brought us into it very directly. I can go back and give you 3 years of just constant testimony how God has led up to this point, things that He's done. And I tell Jim, my wife, and those working with us, I said, until the Lord says no, we're going to keep going ahead. If we're the last ones doing it, we're going to keep going ahead. And, you know, I'm a bullheaded German. You know, I'm not going to give up, you know. But then again, the real issue for us is that we have seen God going before us, and this is extremely important to us. No, yeah, it does look hopeless. Funding part looks absolutely disastrous. But we're trusting the Lord, and He's going to turn some fishes and loaves or something here to make us be able to do what we need to do. Or maybe He's going to confuse the enemy. I don't know. Question in the back.
I just want to tell Jim that you'll probably see some progress in your lifetime. The last time the homosexual community tried this was basically in Berlin in the 20s and 30s. And at Auschwitz, we'll notice that the first prisoners in Auschwitz were not criminals of conscience, they were not murderers. They were the homosexual elite of Berlin. Basically tore the fabric of German society apart and allowed a monster like Hitler to come to vote among the Lutheran churches.
Yes, I'm familiar with.
And our civil society as a whole is dangerous. Not only our Christian God.
Thank you. There's another question. Yes.
Apart from the literature, which I know a lot of that is going to scare us and kind of activate us by fear, and which I don't think is wrong. And the experience that I've had is I have serious restrictions lessons. And that has been very effective for me to be concerned about this because I love her. And she has everything in the world going for her. She does not turn off the general public. You know, she doesn't set off gaydars. She doesn't offend when you first know her. She's beautiful and talented and completely broken. And I would welcome any insight into how I can reach her for Christ.
Right.
And I'm really embarrassed.
It's okay. We debated whether we're going to say this here, but we are in the process of writing another book. And one of the things, there's several things about the book. Number one, we've made it our goal to really try to follow Jesus' example. Jesus always spoke up to people. Apart from the Pharisees, or the hypocrites, the religious hypocrisy of his day. I mean, that was another deal. I mean, he let them have it between the eyes. But apart from that, he always spoke up to people, and he never compromised truth. In John 1:10, it says, Jesus Christ, full of grace and truth. Both those things, two opposites, hand in hand. One of the things in our research, and Jim has confirmed for us, is one of the things we really wanted to know, to get into the heart of this thing, not just the technical aspects and all these things, but to really get around and to walk with them, not only just, the ex-people coming out of the lifestyle, whatever process they are, but to get inside. And there's some real pain that these people feel. And it comes from rejection. And it starts out with parents, it starts out with their peers, coming up through school. I mean, I'm not going to go cite to you all the various things that feed into this, but these people feel a lot of pain and rejection. Real hurt. And one of the things that we've noticed, and I've been asking some questions, has this ever been acknowledged publicly? Now, some of the testimonies from the people that come out of lifestyle, they've talked about that, but there's never been any public thing acknowledging the pain that they've gone through, the struggles that they've gone through. We've always come down on you. And hopefully in our book we want to use that as a basis we're brutally truthful, but I think we're brutally loving too, and accepting, and also putting in the same realm of any other addictive behaviors. My wife and I have been involved in the ministry for 40 years. We've worked with all types of people. We can tell you some pains from another end of working with drug addicts and this type of thing. Plus being involved in the foundation side and, giving away money and all that stuff. I mean, this is a whole thing, the opposite end of the world. We've been out in the gutter with these people. And, which I think gives us an advantage of being able to connect in and think, and we're hopefully going to write to that degree. Hopefully to enlighten the Christian community. There's some things in the Christian community that we haven't done. We've in fact, it was my first response. I got to tell you this. I got a call to come and see this guy that was hiding out. It was Jim Johnson, and I only had Jim didn't know I was going to tell this story. He's probably got his own story from his own side to tell what he felt. His feelings were going through. And I had never been around, and I was worried he was going to hit on me. What kind of shirt do I wear? I like to dress in cowboy boots when I'm a little farm boy, And I just didn't know. I would have done it with fear and trembling. Of course, Jim sitting on the other end, he's been greatly hurt. There's the issue of trust, and it took Jim, I think, according to Jim's testimony he's given, he says, Don, he says, you and your wife now, I can trust you. Now, I think I'm not putting words in your mouth. I hope not, Jim. But it's taken years because of even the pain, even after having coming out of the lifestyle and dealing with the residue of those things was great. Very.
My friend knew that I was a believer, and
we're in our book. We're using a lot of stories, and we've used a lot of case studies. Even the stuff we've done for Jim Burns and his youth group, we call them case studies to do it. But in the book, we're getting back the chapters. Just they start out with the story, and then we stop and we talk about the story, and then we go on and this type of thing. But we go through some of the interactions and this type of things, the feelings and the a different story for each different chapter, totally different story. And because we think it's so necessary to try to communicate to the Christian community some of the dynamics they're going through. Now, this is also true for people with drug addictions, sexual addictions, alcohol addictions, gambling addictions. In fact, one of the things we haven't mentioned in our book, as I'm thinking about it, is the gambling addictions and the things that these people go through, the addictive behaviors. They all come back to the root source. All comes back to the family and some dynamics. Now, there are some exceptions. Can be some chemical imbalances. There can be a number of other, we call it physical factors or physical deficiencies that can take place and can start setting the stage for this type of thing. But one of our goals is to try to educate the Christian community about the struggles they're going through. My wife and I have worked with people in Bible studies and stuff for years, and if two man and a woman come to us and they've been living together, we don't make that the central issue. Or if we're on the college campus and they're shacking up with something, that isn't the issue. We just get them the Word, we love them, and we work it out, and we allow the Holy Spirit to begin to speak and minister to them. And then pretty soon they come up and say, I don't think I ought to be doing this. Do you think so? Maybe it takes 6 months. But, we can accept that, but then we take a jump. If a person's struggling with homosexuality, straighten up before you come in the which is hypocritical on our part. Jim, do you want to comment?
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that most Christians have approached it from the standpoint of you need to get out of homosexuality. And you'll read the stories of many of us. Joe Dallas has written a book in the last couple of years. Many of us were deacons in the gay church and worked our way through that way. We worked our way back through things like that. But for those that don't know the Lord, our responsibility is to bring them to Christ. That's why we're here. And I know there's people that are going to disagree and want to put in the doctrine and say they're going to be under false doctrine or something, but the last time I read through the book, it was the same as it was 40-some years ago when I read it the first time. It's all in there. And so bringing someone to the Lord and giving them the Scriptures It's been pretty much the same in my lifetime. I don't think anybody's rewritten. Well, there's a few people have tried to rewrite it, but anyway, you see, the point is that when you read the scriptures, you cannot. You have two choices. You can read around Corinthians, you can read around Romans 1, or you can read the whole thing. And so the homosexually oriented person has the same scriptures as you and I have, and the same opportunity. And so that's the work of the Holy Spirit. And then you're not there pitting God against sexuality. And I've been very critical about this because I've tried to point out for over a decade now, because of the number of people that have died that I've taken care of, that told me over and over again, and you'll hear it from the pastor's son in that book over there, they were preached first about their homosexuality, and second about Jesus Christ. When it was the work of the Holy Spirit to work out the problems in their life, the same as it is with each of us, whether it be lying or drugs or alcohol, promiscuity, greed. They're all listed. Yeah. Gossips, whoremongers, they're all listed there.
The thing that works in presenting the gospel is that even if I came to the Lord at 5 years old, I was no further from the Lord at 5 years old than she is now. And I told her that.
Great. We'd like to continue on this conversation maybe after. We have another question, a couple more questions.
Well, add up to that, I feel that we not, with what we feel about homosexuality, I mean, it's one of many sins, that we throw away the person instead of make a difference and compete between what is being done and the person. Because the person is the Jesus Christ died for him as well, for her.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have personal experience because I was married to a homosexual. And it took some time that the Lord really worked it through with me to say that I could forgive him for what he'd done. And only through that I could have personal growth and also love him in the way Christ is loving him and start to pray for him.
Yeah, excellent.
And that's the only way for my children's sake and for myself. And that's what I think we've been disregarded them and thought that we don't want to have anything to do with you. And I mean, I am in the music circles I'm moving around, and I have many homosexual friends, and they're still my friends. And I go to them and they don't blame me. And I feel they see something in me. They see the love of Christ and that fascinates them. And I feel that's the only way, if you have real relationships with them, that you can bring them to Christ, or Christ can work through you.
Thank you.
Hanoi has 2 children, a boy and a girl, and the boy is going through this withdrawal period that we've seen. I'm sharing this. I hope I have your permission. And she has this that we have seen before, a withdrawal within the son. It's very hard on the children, and this attitude is different than some of the denominational attitudes that we will find. I have examples this year that I spent time with interdenominationally of where, when the homosexuality came out, the family is mandated under some denominational backgrounds to totally divorce that child. I spent a great deal of time with over 50 gay fathers and more children of gay parents than I can even remember in Utah now, and scores of Jehovah's Witnesses. They're given a chance of repentance, and if they do not make the repentant gesture in some of the denominations, then they are literally divorced from the family and cannot see the family. In other cases, say for instance the Mormons, if they have made covenants in the temple, then it's that severe. If they have not made temple covenants, then there's more leniency about their homosexuality. But if they've made covenants, then there is 5 years that they are ostracized from their ward.
Great. There's more questions, Rich?
Yeah, just a question on school curriculum, school books and schools. I'm from a city in Southern California near where Fieldstead is. And I served for 5 years on a curriculum advisory committee in our school district. We're a school district of about 23,000 students, K through 12. That committee was put in place by the school board in this about 10 years ago. because they didn't want to hear all these complaints, individual complaints from parents and so forth. I think the biggest problem in terms of schools and the materials that find their way in the classrooms is just our own apathy. You've got to be in touch with the books and curriculum that are in our kids' classrooms, whether you've got grandkids or kids. You should make that a priority. Usually, a lot of these materials, I haven't seen the stuff that Jim brought, and some of it's probably more blatant, but even the subtle materials find their way in through a sympathetic teacher. It's not your teachers don't get together and 30 teachers decide we want this book. 30 teachers adopt the book. And in our particular context, the school board decided that no books would be used in the classroom if they weren't screened by this particular committee. You should encourage your school board members to do such a thing. If not, you may be in a school district that just has an employee or administrator that has authority over these things, and you've got to speak up. Look at these books, read what they say. Superintendents do not like they don't like seeing school board rooms packed with people that are opposing textbooks. They will, if it's a single issue, they'll work with the faculties and I'm not speaking across the board. I don't travel the country, but I think in a lot of cases, they'll get that book out of there before it gets to a public hearing before a school board. It's not good for the school districts. A few of them that are maybe more liberal parts of the country or liberal cities, they may defend such materials, but I think if people in the Christian community speak up and see what's in these books before they've been adopted, it'll help a lot.
Great, thank you. I'd like to have you fill out these. I just brought this up before. I forget. We still got a few minutes, and I saw some more hands. Yes, back there. Let me give you the speaker.
You spoke about, which I'm really glad that you have, about the preventive agenda that you're working on. The topic today was the homosexual agenda and what it will mean to your children and grandchildren. Could someone speak a little more directly to that issue?
Okay. Who wants to take a shot at that?
Well, certainly, and I apologize incidentally about the prevention. This is a book that's over 30 years old. When I was a young man, this book is called Growing Up Straight. And it's not my original copy, but it's the paperback copy that was in my library. I have about 3,000 copies of various books on sexuality that I've collected over the last 30 years, 40 years, since I was a kid, trying to find out who I was in the world. The reason I bring this up is that there was a statement here from a doctor who was the executive director at that time of SICUS. I would regard it as the obligation of every parent to read this book. This is one of the books that is my case study for the fact that when I was a young man, the emphasis was on helping the person prevent the development, and then all of a sudden, because of politics, this has changed. The reason that we're talking about children, that I am leading into trying to answer your question, the reason we're talking about children and grandchildren is if a publication from the U.S. Public Health Service has changed in 30 years from what I got as a boy, as a teenager, can you imagine what it's going to be like for the next generation or the current generation, next generation, and the following generation? Because that's where we're going. And in the laws, when you're having to pass laws to protect marriage, and what marriage is, then what is marriage going to be in the next generation? It's been 5 or 6 years since I was in San Francisco for the passing of domestic partnership, the original domestic partnership in San Francisco. Over 300 couples were united the first day, and some of those couples were triads and quads. So they weren't just pairs. Most people in the nation thought it was just pairs. But there were triads and quads that were married that day also. I did that live over, as a matter of fact, I broadcast live that day from the rotunda in San Francisco at the courthouse, what I was seeing over focus
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, okay. I think just to kind of recap things here just a little bit, I think one of the things our researchers brought out that there was many books written 30 years ago, and the debate and the discussion was on prevention, not just homosexuality, but all sorts of addictive behaviors. And talking with some secular people, they're very alarmed at the state of where we're at today. And their comment was, if we had stayed the course on prevention, dealing with the families and the problems of that, we wouldn't be where we're at today. So this topic that we're bringing up, and hopefully to jar you a little bit and to make you aware that things have gotten a lot worse the last 30 years, and they're heading down but we do have an opportunity to do something positive about it, and that was the reason we gathered together. It's 3 o'clock. We want to thank you very, very much for attending here, and we'll be around if you have some more questions or anything. If you want to look at some material, we'd love to do it, and please fill out, conference has asked me to ask you to fill out the questionnaires for us.